Thank you all for being here. Doug, what's broken in enterprise AI? Let's start there.
Wow, that's a very broad topic. I mean, we could take a huge kind of timeline perspective, right? What happened in the beginning? I'm sure everybody's well familiar with Microsoft coming out with Copilot everything. I don't know about you guys, but looking at all the different types of Copilot buttons that I see in there, it just becomes overwhelming, right? And I guess the thesis for Microsoft, and I've spoken to Microsoft Research and helped kind of develop Copilot tuning with the Microsoft Research team. That was one of kind of like the things that came out of our internal discussions with them. But at the end of the day, it's just, you have so much kind of like choice overload, right? Meaning that you don't exactly know how to use this thing. Yeah, it could find a couple of things for you, but at the end of the day, does it really add a lot of value to you? So I think the kind of trajectory that things are going right now with the advent of OpenClaw and NVIDIA going in very deep and looking at it from a perspective, all the enterprises who adopt this, they kind of miss the fundamental type of issue with all this, okay? We all have toil when we work in large corporations. How many times do you sit there and you get a notification for certain things, like I go through an approval process and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you're just kind of like, I have no idea what this is. You get the information security review, access control type of activities coming in. I look at it, and I've been in InfoSec for like 30 years, right? I look at it, I'm like, I have no idea what the hell I'm approving, right? And I think the adoption, the goal to have like an open cloud in the enterprise, it's a great thing. It will happen eventually. But looking at it from a perspective, what really adds value for people's time is get rid of all this toil for me. You spend so much time sitting there trying to figure out exactly what kind of decisions you have to make. If a system existed that goes into, like, let's say, architecture review processes. I'm sure you've all been there. You go there, you PowerPoint presentations, 2 or 3 hours go by and no decisions ever gets made. Translate that to every type of approval process, be it financial markets, for new credit product launches, or anything else, you're spending about 70% of the time. While all these other startups are coming in with very pointed solutions, I would like to call them substrate type of solutions that really does not address the fundamental issues within the enterprise, which is free up my time. I need to concentrate on the work. And that kind of thing is not really quite there. I haven't seen that. My litmus test, because when I was with P&G, it was basically, my litmus test of all this was like, how much time does this save me? Does this make my work harder or easier? And I think that was one of the core fundamental problems with Copilot, how this thing was working. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. I mean, so when you were global head of innovation, you talked to all these VCs, you probably talked to 1,000 startups a year. From the startup perspective, how do you kind of make sense of why do I care about these 5? Because it's very hard if you're a founder to understand what really goes on inside of a Fortune 50 company, which, I mean, you guys are 10 Fortune 500 companies mashed together, sort of. So how do you make sense of, how do you actually prioritize? These are the problems that I need to solve. These are the spaces that we want to look at because they're going to move the needle. And then from the startup side, how do you understand, given that you can't see inside of a very, very large enterprise, how do you understand what are the business problems that actually matter, where if you can create a product that solves one particular pain point, you can kind of get this alignment?
There's multiple layers to that. What really means value for people in different levels of the organization is quite different. People who are in the SRE or different types of business processes, again, the fundamental thing there is about giving time back to actually concentrate on real work. Next is the senior executive perspective, right? One of the use cases is things that we've seen is just basically like, oh, we used AI, we got all these creatives, everything done, or we got you some sort of insight. And this top senior executives will come back and basically say, oh, okay, well, tell me something I don't know. But the rebuttal to that was, oh, we got this to you faster now. See, it doesn't help move the needle at that point. So you could get to the same type of answer a lot faster. Yeah, there is validation in that. There's some sort of intrinsic value. But does that help grow revenue for your company? Maybe, maybe not. It's very indirect. It's like kind of trying to measure ROI when it comes down to email. Everybody says, we need email. Okay, give me the ROI on email. Nobody could quantify that, right? So I think agentic systems and the way things are being focused right now, we are bit, if not pitfall. And then going back, how do startups really are able to penetrate and make things sticky, or what's the actual value that's happening, right? It's extremely simple, right? Is that side. Make people's lives easier at the end of the day. And from our executive perspective, tell them something they don't already know.
Got it. Now, what about the large platform? I mean, if you're an established enterprise, you've been around for 170 years or whatever it is, eventually you end up with like a handful of very large platforms that you're super invested in. I'll pick on ServiceNow in this example. Like, could a platform like that in the large enterprise ever be replaced? And how would it happen? Because you have these agentic solutions and you have the frameworks, and it feels like there's something there, but like, could that actually happen?
I mean, taking a look at all the SaaS companies and all the announcements coming out and how much the market cap has been reduced, it's a short, clear sign that those companies, their footprint is going to be reduced. People don't know exactly how, but let me just go back to the exact point about Toil. Let me take a segue. Have you guys seen the Andreessen Horowitz study with Open Router? The 10 trillion token, it's out there, just take a look at it. And it shows exactly what people are using LLMs for. The interesting portion of all this is like, usual suspects of things, people using it to do work and all that kind of stuff. But the kind of striking thing, which is kind of disconnected from the enterprises, was 52% of it was really about human connection. About the surveys that are coming back was also about, I want to use agentic systems, or I want to use LLMs so I have more time to spend with my family. So, okay, wow, right? We all kind of like feel that way. And if you go back from a Toil perspective, or like, let's say, let's use the example of ServiceNow, I can't make heads and tails of this thing. I look at the system and it's just like 20 or 30 different types of buttons, all these different types of fields, and even like, Workday or any of those kind of, processes that have been put together. It's extremely, extremely complicated to get anything right. And you spend so much time in things that, it really don't add much value to get your work done. So I see a future where these kind of things will probably stay there. The UIs are going to go away. It's all going to be API based, and work where people are. Teams, Slack, or whatever the case is. They'll go back in there, be able to do all the different types of processes for you, understand the processes, and ping you asynchronously to be able to say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. I already did the research for you. All these access requests means XYZ. These are your employees, or whatever the case is. They need it, they don't need it. I've done all that work for you. Now it's time for you to make a decision. Are you going to approve this access request or not? Or even like, let's say, purchasing, right? Any of those kind of activities will be abstracted away from those very heavy UIs that people are seeing. A UI-less world is going to be there. So when that starts happening, right, people are going to start questioning, why do I need ServiceNow? Why do I need this? Why do I need that? Unless those companies really step up and really address the issue, address the monster they've created. There's way too many processes in the back end. I'm not saying these processes are useless. They're there for different types of compliance and regulatory type of reasoning, but at the end of the day, people get exhausted by this kind of stuff. So just addressing those type of issues, making it easier for people. And that displacement, that inflection points, is going to happen fairly soon, sooner than we actually think.
Yeah, I was talking to this large private equity firm, and it's amazing how quickly these UIs are going away. Like the partners now want to work in Outlook. And they're like, why do I have to leave Outlook? I have all my email. Like, why can't I just ask for information, get answers to questions from Outlook? And this shift, I feel like, is very much accelerating, which maybe a good follow-up is, if you're a large company, you spend so much time and energy making the look and feel of all your internal applications consistent. What does it mean for that investment? Like, if people are used to going to a place and you've built all this stuff, and now everybody just wants to work, like, I want to do everything in Teams or whatever it is.
Yeah. Who thinks, just kind of like, looking around, who thinks LLM generation, when, even if it's through Copilot or anything like that, you look at it, you get like a wall of text. And you're just like, oh my God, now I have to read through all these things, trying to figure out exactly what it's actually telling me, right? The trend is going to be a dynamic UI path, meaning through Slack or through Teams or whatever your even email might go away, because it's kind of like, wow, this is great, but still in certain degrees a bit useless. It adds a lot of noise, too much noise, in order to even trying to get any kind of jobs done. So the UI is going to be very little text, and then you're going to see a lot of different types of graphs and things, the relevant information. A picture paints 1,000 words. So all these kind of things, and there is, beginnings of that, right? You saw OpenClaw, Canvas, and various other companies are starting to create all these things. And the new standard that came out right now, I think it was with Google, Microsoft, the Meta, they're extending HTTP to include agentic tags. So no more web scraping, taking a screenshot. This is directly to the web type of interface. People started upgrading this kind of stuff. The UI essentially is going to go away. And then the thought of all that afterwards is just to be able to have these conversational aspects of things and get jobs done. I don't know about you guys, but I hate putting PowerPoints together. What if your expression and things in the works and things you're trying to achieve gets dynamically created by mermaid charts or whatever the case is, and there's a lot of HTML type of systems that could make all these very engaging dynamic UIs already for you. So you see the instinct from people are, that's going to start going away, and within the next 5 years, things are going to look drastically different from what we are actually experiencing. And this is why, I think it was the CEO of Coca-Cola or Walmart basically saying, leadership currently is not equipped where things are going. So they need new people, new CEOs to really understand where the dynamic shifts are coming. So that's why it's like a huge danger to these established players, through Microsoft, to all these different types of SaaS providers. And the market has spoken right now. They've been losing a lot of the share prices because of a byproduct of all this.
Yeah, super interesting. The point about email, you could definitely make the point that documentation is communication now, because if you have this unifying layer across the different large platform vendors and you have all this data in one place, not only can you bring the data to you, right, if you're working in Outlook and you can answer questions or proactively give you information that's relevant, but there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to communicate that to somebody else most of the time. If you think about the emails that you write every day, I mean, probably a large percentage of them are just reiterating things that you already have written down somewhere else. There's no reason an agentic system couldn't figure out who you should be communicating that to and proactively do it for you.
So let me ask you a question, David. From all your customers you are integrating with and taking a look at their data sources, what would you consider the percentage of all this data being redundant?
Very large. The CTO, who I won't name, calls Box a digital wasteland because it's an incentives problem, right? Yeah. Everybody's incentivized, and I came from Splunk, so believe me, Splunk is incentivized for you to send a lot of redundant logs into Splunk, which is why other companies exist to solve that problem, the problem of the Splunk bill. Yeah, I mean, all of these companies are incentivized to get more and more of your data, not give you any tools to actually manage it. And so I think one of the large opportunities is really just, and I know there's a 5-time CIO who's a good friend of ours who's solving this problem right now. Basically the janitor. I could go into these data repositories and clean up all this redundant stuff. And the tools exist now, right? Because I mean, it's not just the data; it's who's involved. And so, if you can find the same kind of stuff written by the same group of people in 10 different, iterations and so on and so forth, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and it's all about relevancy, right? And when we were speaking, when I was in P&G, we talked about all these different types of data redundancies and the actual relevancy, and we're trying to solve this very problem of that, the fact that, I don't know, there's like 30 or 40 different versions of whatever, finance sheet version 12, 14, and everybody says, hey, put it to SharePoint, everyone work on it. Maybe compliance rates about 20% of people doing that, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Forget it, I'm going to download a copy, and all of a sudden you have like 3 or 4 different of the same spreadsheets.
Final,
V12, V14, V46. Reality is right now, right? I mean, that's why I think it's very important, especially with IBM and Atolio, the partnership you guys have, right? It's exactly this type of issues that I think people are not really tackling. It's too hard of a problem to certain degrees, and they're thinking some sort of agentic system will be able to help all this. But let's look at it from a more fundamental kind of perspective. The way we are working, the tools that we are given are contributing to this issue of data proliferation. And then you have regulatory, if you're in a regulated market like financial services or healthcare, and you start looking at it, and the lawyers will never sign off of like ever deleting any of this information, because it's like, well, there's a bit of liability or anything like that, or even compressing all these things together. So there's a decision paralysis when it comes down to record retention, different types of record retention laws, regulatory compliance, and be able to prove all the different types of work that are happening. But really getting the search right, search within the enterprises, be able to push people into a form that when you present them with the latest document that has been updated or people have worked in, and be able to do some sort of merge and deduplication process in the back end, will naturally flow people into creating less amount of digital waste, as you put it.
So it's an interesting word that you use there, laws. So I think that there's this incredible bifurcation between how companies out here adopt AI, use agents, solve search and other problems, and how traditional companies, whether they care about the data getting stolen, they care about their IP, right? Obviously, you've been accruing all this IP, you care about keeping that IP out of the hands of the model providers. Data residency, so laws around where the data has to stay, regulation, preference, geopolitical issues. How does AI actually get adopted in large enterprises? And You talk to a lot of CIOs. What are people actually doing with agents for real in production these days?
I'll give you kind of like a timeline of what I've seen, and spoken to Goldman, spoken to JP Morgan, OpenAI. I think it was October, met with OpenAI in their headquarters. But a lot of people are struggling with all this, right? To be able to really create what the trajectory of, the value is. So what happened in the beginning is like they got API access. All of a sudden they started like saying, hey, we're gonna put a chatbot in, and this will be great, be able to reason. And then all of a sudden, that I'll sell you a car for $1 came out, and people were like, oh no, this is horrible. Okay, let's clamp it back. And then you saw all these companies scaling this entire thing back, giving it very little autonomy on this AI agent or LLM calls we're doing in the backside. And then all of a sudden, you just have a regular chatbot now, very deterministic. Then why do you use an LLM in the back end in the first place? Why would you do that? That was one of the initial mistakes from the entire industry that I saw. Yeah. And then they got disillusioned, like, oh, you're supposed to be able to solve all these problems and have his internal knowledge, but it's not working. So then they started pivoting, and the technology companies started looking at this as like, no, we have to use internal knowledge of the system itself, give it enough room, so you don't make everything deterministic. If you want determinism, just go regular chatbot type of activities. But if you want a bit more creativeness of be able to do things a bit more autonomous, it's a fine edge. You do one or the other way too much, you're gonna end up with a lot of risk, a lot of issues. So I think the companies, a lot of companies are right now still struggling with that. But instead of, and you see a lot of companies over here who are focused on giving you the tools to do this, but no real kind of solutions, right? No real like solutions to be able to say, hey, that is the issue that I'm trying to solve. They were like, oh no, we'll give you this thing, guardrails and all that kind of stuff, and the rest is up to you. They're just giving you a whole bunch of different types of pickaxes and things like that. But to kind of like make a car, they're kind of like leaving it up to you to actually go and process. People are getting smarter about this. They're creating agentic harnesses. There's a lot of experimentation. Again, this is the second wave of experimentation happening with harness type of system. You have to give it the right context and right memory. And then you're going to see a lot of companies, hopefully they start getting the right ideas and thoughts, tackle business processes that are eating up a lot of time within your enterprises.
What do those harnesses look like?
Harnesses, it has to be multi-agentic right now, and basically, there's a lot of patterns out there, right? You have a master agent who coordinates everything. One of the reasons why I left P&G to do my own startup in this type of space is basically, be able to tackle these type of processes that exist, these onerous processes, but at the end of the day, it's a multi-agentic deliberation type of system. Like, let's say you're doing architecture reviews, and one of the bigger problems that you see within the enterprises is, especially when you're dealing with a lot of consumer information, is where do I put this? Where can I shift it? You got to hire a whole bunch of lawyers to keep up with all the data privacy laws and kind of figure out where I can move data from point A to point B. Financial services, everybody else, has this type of constraints, and it's a never-ending game. So if you have these multi-agentic systems all working in coordination to be able to get you the right information, put it all together, and you go through a deliberation process, you're gonna be able to get to the right answers extremely quickly and right actionable answers to get the work done.
Awesome. So are enterprises actually using agents in production?
Still dabbling, a lot of dabbling, but you have a question.
Yeah, so, at least I see this narrative in the market. So there are some companies which seem to be like going really fast, especially all the native AI companies. They're able to get maximum productivity. They put out all these use cases, case studies, etc. So how real is that? I mean, And why are other companies unable to do this? So let's say, if you compare P&G to maybe Google, right? So what's the difference? Is that because they've built their models and that's why they're able to move fast? They already have secured this thing, or is it just a sales pitch because they've created those models? So, and just trying to figure out what are those archetypes of companies which are like really successful, and do they even exist, or is that smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, I'll use an example. So one of our partners is Carasoft. They do $22 billion in revenue with the federal government. So sat down with the CEO, and he was giving me two examples, which I'll call Company A and Company B. One of them has a lot of TV commercials talking about agents. And so he's sitting down with their teams, and Company B says, okay, we have 6,000 agentic use cases. And he said, wow.
Yeah.
Where are they? And then basically the guy was like, they're in a desk drawer, waiting for us to build them. And the other example was, and this is one that's probably been running TV commercials for agents for, a long time, I'll call it. They say, okay, well, tell me, can I have a case study, because I want to sell this stuff. No, there are no case studies, because it's not in production. People aren't actually using it. So I think that there's a lot of people are incentivized to get you to believe certain things, especially in this world. And one of the questions I had for you is how do you even tell what of this stuff even not just works, but actually exists in the first place? It would be a fascinating path to go down. But I think a big challenge is that everybody is incentivized to get you to think that either the product works or that they're so far ahead with whatever it is that they're deploying. The on-the-ground reality, which is part of why we wanted to have this talk, is that it's maybe 3% of what you think is actually going on.
3%?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm curious, of the perception of what are the best-in-class companies doing? I'm curious how much of that you think is real.
Well, I can't really talk about P&G stuff, but I'll just give you a bit of personal observations from my side. Yeah, 3% sounds about right. 6,000 agentic use cases. This is all dreamed up by business leaders who are looking at it from a perspective of this is a pain point, this is a pain point, but they're all disconnected. If you have 6,000 use cases and you deploy all this kind of stuff out, now you created 6,000 different types of processes that you have to follow, right? There has to be a shift in thinking of being able to put this together into a single process that actually helps people do the work. That's why I'm always about saving people's time in the Toil side. I haven't really seen something like this out there, but that's kind of my personal wish list of things. Because being in industry for quite some time, I sat there and so many times that I don't want to do this. This is wow, it's going to take so much time out of my time. And just getting that, and that goes back to the adoption stage, right? That was the missing piece, really talking to a lot of my peers within the industry, that these agentic use cases were not solving, and I don't think anybody has gotten this correctly yet. But I could say, talking to Google, I think it was a couple of months ago, I was with them, and we brought up the issue, the same type of question to them, how real is this? How much are you guys actually doing? And the flip side of this entire question was also, let me take a step back. What they came back was we're doing a lot of agentic use cases, but mostly what they're doing is coding. Then I was okay, that's a number one marquee use case that everybody has. And then we asked, okay, so what's happening with the coding space? Are you guys getting more productivity or not? As you've seen, first time ever, AWS, Cloudflare, all these people, GitHub, their 5 nines of reliability has gone down to maybe two or 3 nines. And
GitHub's unusable on a plane now. It's crazy.
And then you're wow, okay, so you used to have 5 nines, now you have 2 nines or 3 nines if you're actually lucky. That means possibly 3 weeks out of the year you had outages. It's like completely unusable, right? And that goes back to this is the marquee agentic use case that's supposed to be doing things extremely well. Then the flip side of all of that is like they've seen a degradation of the coding quality because of their own folks, and the right way to kind of approach this, they are kind of struggling with that too.
We're back to measuring lines of code as an indicator of progress, which is making me feel really old. We're learning the same lessons for the second or third time.
It's around a way of saying it. Even the Czech giants haven't gotten this right. No.
No, that's and the reason I'm asking this is because there's a lot of pressure. So everyone's talking about, okay, you keep your headcount constant or reduce it, and then the workload keeps piling up. So is that a forced way of making people to experiment and figure out ways in organization to your point, reducing toil, right? I mean, somehow you go figure out how to reduce toil with these tools that we've given you. And maybe somebody will come up with that magical solution. I could totally identify with those 50 versions of a pricing sheet or an Excel sheet, right? And which one is the right one? And maybe 49th was better than the final, right? Which was approved.
Yeah, Doug gave a really interesting example talking about Toil when we were having dinner prepping for this. A really simple mental model of what problems should you go into to try to solve in the large enterprise, given the opacity. It's really just find something I don't want to do, right? Rather than thinking of it, what is the use case or who are we going to sell it to? It's like find some executive and figure out what they don't want to do and go do that thing. Go solve something that addresses that.
Yeah, because like I'll tell you, a lot of these agentic use cases driven top down. They're like, this is going to increase my revenue. Where are the agentic use cases from the bottom up? People saying, I don't want to do all this kind of stuff. But if you say, I don't want to do all this kind of stuff, it's a double-edged sword. People are saying, oh, you don't want to do actually your work. So people get really repressed on vocalizing all this kind of things, right? But if you go down to like somebody who's been in the company 5 years and you start talking to them, they'll be like, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I doing this? This is crazy. Wasting 90% of my time. You will find the gold mine of actual use cases because the top executives, they have admins, they have like all the support staff that is going through this entire toil.
Right.
And,
I don't have any problem finding stuff. It's like, well, you have 3 VPs who will just scurry around for 90 minutes to go find it for you. Of course you don't have that problem.
Right? So it's like, it's kind of like, look, let's just get real about this. And that's like a byproduct, right? The CIOs, CTOs, they're driving this type of thing because, their language is completely different between what people on the other side are actually doing. They're focused on growth for the company and stuff, and they think this is a growth engine. Yes, it is in certain degrees. It can be, but the approaches is again, goes back to the old traditional type of approaches, and they need to take a look at it wholesale and trying to figure out what exactly is that will be able to help drive more value. I'll give you an interesting analogy. This was about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I took, in P&G we had the SK2, which is a prestige brand for cosmetics and stuff, right? So it's like $200 a bottle, It's actually proven to de-age people's skins and stuff, right? So I took the entire team, we went to Redmond and we met with Microsoft. And Microsoft CFO, he was like talking about this is before this agentic system, but their entire process was to automate as much as possible, to remove toil from a lot of the workload from people. Before it was like a pyramid, right? You had the top decision makers over here, and then you had all these people in the bottom doing a lot of toil. So they said, we're going to flip this triangle upside down. We want more people to be able to think strategically and remove a lot of the different types of toils. I'm just kind of surprised why, that's a great approach and a great way of thinking, but, And that should be aspirational, but that hasn't really translated to a lot of these solutions. I was walking down over here and taking a look at, I was like 95% of all these companies I already met, and still at the end of the day, it doesn't really help me or help the organization be more efficient, be less burdened by administrative processes to be able to really help the company grow by coming up with better ideas, be more strategic thinkers, growing that type of muscle. And that's what you really want to do.
It's almost like that investment banker mindset. You have to work 80-hour weeks because I have to work 80-hour weeks.
Exactly.
And on forever.
Hopefully, that answers some questions, or, we'd love to take more questions if you guys have any.
I've got another question is, in adopting AI, if you buy the wrong thing and it's vaporware, you get fired.
Yeah.
If you buy something and your data gets, lost or trained on a model provider, you get fired. And if you do nothing, you get fired. So if you're a large company, CIO or a CIO's direct, what do you do? Who do you listen to? How do you make sense of this world where I think that it's fair to say that there's more deception and dishonesty in the software business than I've ever seen. Like products that just wholesale don't actually work.
I still think there's just like two classes of companies only available right now. There's companies are selling you a prompt, a very pretty prompt, by the way, and large, nice harnesses around this entire system that does something, right? But still, at the end of the day, it's a prompt. And then you have other companies who are, providing you the LLM infrastructure and inference. In order to kind of the advice I would give to a lot of people is do a lot of POCs. Do not go into a long-term contract. And that was just my personal view about these kind of things, and I advise a lot of folks about it. 3-4 months, if it looks interesting, great, start doing that with this type of companies. But just to avoid that danger when it comes down to what vaporware is, unless you sit there and actually experiment and take a look at it, you're not really going to be able to tell exactly what the issues or the real value is. So the last thing you want is to be locked into a long-term contract with any of these companies, because you sit there and all of a sudden, or even the danger of Anthropic releases something new, and all of a sudden whatever investments you put in is completely obsolete right now, right? It's available for free now in Anthropic, right? So it's both from a perspective of what the actual technology is delivering, and also a regulatory and compliance risk, and also a kind of like the feature is already being developed somewhere else and is being deployed. One thing I do gotta say is, from a larger enterprise deployment perspective, as these models are getting better, we've seen TurboQuant greatly reducing the KV cache system, so making it more memory efficient for a lot of these large language models. The prices are starting to go down, but still, at the end of the day, the bigger problem you have is you are still calling the API to Anthropic, to OpenAI, or whatever the case might be, and you are sending your information. Minimax 2.7 and all these other new models are coming out. You could run it in 4 H100s. You get the same type of performance as Opus 4.5. The real kind of next evolution when it comes down to infrastructure is going to be equivariant encryption with large language models, meaning that there are technologies like this coming out. Been talking to Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, and people are really looking at it from a perspective of regulatory compliance and all those tokens leaving. The only thing that's helping you right now is a piece of paper that lawyers drafted up between OpenAI and yourself or Anthropic. So I would say be in the lookout for that type of technologies that really help solve the core issue when it comes down to data privacy for these large language models, and people will be, enterprises later on in the future will be running their own GPUs and using equivariant encryption because it encrypts the token space. So even if you intercepted it, you have no idea what the hell the LLM is actually producing back and forth. So that gives you a level of reassurances and privacy I think the entire industry right now is lacking.
Awesome. A last question. If you're a Fortune 500 CIO, what technology are you most excited about?
Currently, I don't think we have fully realized the entire potential of this because large language models themselves is a compressed representation of reality. Grabbing all this text to some corpus of all human knowledge. Take a look at Anthropic's research paper about emotional vectors. These things they've proven that they do have real emotions in the back end. When you increase all these emotional vectors back and forth, this is a gold mine to be able to do more interesting things, like let's say population simulations, to be able to really kind of like make simulation theory actually happen. And that's my vested interest in things like that, really exploring the different types of possibilities. So I don't think anything right now, because there's so many different types of companies doing very similar things, there's very little from my perspective, something that really excites me right now, except for the untapped possibilities that we see right now.
Being able to run every instance of this talk 1,000 times.
Yeah.
See what happens and A/B test everything to the
Exactly.
nth degree. No, it is really fascinating. I mean, I was just rereading 0 to 1 on the plane ride over, and his whole point is you'll never really know what was possible because you only get to play each hand of cards once. Mm-hmm. That's no longer true, and it's I think there's
That company is similarly from Stanford. They raised $100 million in Series A. They're doing a lot of simulations, consumer research. Aru, they raised $20 million in Series A. So all these different types of simulation type of platforms are coming out. Keep an eye on it. It's an interesting space. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of the day.